We talk a lot about lead generation on this show, and oftentimes wholesaling is an exit strategy. Our next guest specializes in selling his deals through seller financing. A few things that really stand out that you'll hear him discuss are an average spread of $50,000, an average spread in interest rates of 4%, an average down payment of 10%, average cash flow of $500 to $600 per unit, no rehab to the properties, and no maintenance repairs. When you take all of that into consideration, you can see why he runs a relatively small but very profitable operation. Listen closely as we talk seller financing with Wyatt Reed. Be sure to grab a copy of my book, More Leads, More Deals, More Profits. You can grab a copy on Amazon today. Also, if you would, please leave a review on the show and share it with someone you think it can help.
Calling all real estate investors. Are you ready to get off the real estate income roller coaster and learn the proven lead generation strategies the experts are using to consistently generate profitable real estate deals? Then you're in the right place. This is More Leads, More Deals, More Profits with your host, Mark Lane. Let's get started.
All right, guys, welcome back. I'm excited for this episode. We have a guest on that specializes in seller financing, and today's going to be talking about how he has used lead generation to amplify his business and to continue, crushing it in the seller finance world. So, Wyatt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. All right, so Wyatt, I'm going to let you take the lead. I'm just going to allow you to give a little intro about yourself. Kind of tell us about where you came from, how you got into real estate, and then we'll kind of dig into the lead generation side.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So my name is Wyatt Reed. I just came from a little podunk town in Tennessee, I think 7,000 to 9,000 people, so not very big at all. I went to college. I was an average student, went to college. It took me 4 years to get a 2-year degree. And I never even used it coming out of it. Right. I fucked up my first year, but I went straight into working. So I was going to school for engineering. Right. And I actually worked my way up in that company to having an engineer's salary and an engineer's title before some of my buddies graduated from college with an engineering degree. So that tells you a little bit about work ethic versus, that. But yeah, I had made it to where I thought that I wanted to be with the title, with the salary, with the house, with my family, got the car, everything like that, by age like 20, 21, right? And I realized that this is not what I want to do, right? I was like, man, what's next? I don't want to stay in this factory for another, 40, 50 years and retire with, maybe some retirement. I don't know. Because we had hit COVID at the time. And one of the engineers there that was like 60, 70 years old, he was like, I lost half of my retirement. I'm going to have to work for, the rest of my life. And he was somebody that I really looked up to, who really trained me and poured into me. And I was like, man, that's terrifying. And because he had worked there his whole life. And so I took to the internet like all great millennials do and just typed in how to make money, in business or passively. And a lot of people came up and Chris Crone was one of the guys. You may know him, but he had the BMW i8, the mansion, which is probably none of that's probably his, right? But I was like, this is it. And I didn't send him any money. I didn't want to make him my mentor, but I figured real estate was where it was going to be. So I tried to make that work myself. Right.
Okay. So a couple of cool things. So one, I worked in a factory, so I can relate to this. Two, I also had the same conversations with people at the factory. In fact, I had the conversation with a guy. This was shortly after the housing bubble, and same thing. His 401k became a 201k. It dropped in half. And I didn't know anything about money or finances or investing, but I knew, man, that doesn't sound right. Like, why would you be putting your money into something where that can happen? And so I have a question. So at that age, how much were you making? What was your salary?
My salary was 70 grand a year. I thought that is
pretty, that's pretty good for that age.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. And that's really surprising that your company, whoever you were working for, was what allowed you to move up the ranks without the college degree, especially as an engineer. That's really, really impressive.
Yeah, I interned, so I worked on the line for about a year. I mean, literally just running a screwdriver, right? And I just jumped around from station to station. I wanted to provide value, and I was one of those guys that, would do all the stuff that everybody else complained about. And then I interned into maintenance because I knew the manager. I knew his son. His son was a good friend of mine. And I was like, hey, I want to go to school to get my degree. I want to go back to school to get my degree. Can I intern in? And I'd done that. And then the engineer that I worked on his line as a maintenance man saw my work ethic, and he actually became the engineering manager down the road. And so he pulled me out of that as well and let me intern into being an engineer. So it was really cool. Like, obviously, yes, it's who you know, but they understood my work ethic, right? So it wasn't just who I knew; it was my work ethic as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. So one thing you said is you're kind of looking at some of the guys that had been there a long time, and that's not the life that you want to live. That was actually one of the main drivers, aside from the vision I've talked about in several different videos I've shot about, like seeing my daughter grow up to be like I was at that time, like broke and desperate and all that stuff. But, I would oftentimes look at the guys at the factory that were the old timers, right? Is what we called them. The old timers that had been there for 30 years. They were probably in their 50s, maybe even 60s. And they were so beat down, and they didn't have a zest for life. Post work included going to the casino, going to the bar. Like they weren't living the life I want to live at all. And it sounds like that's like to me, I call that foresight, right? We have that foresight of saying, if I stay in this place, this is the life I'm going to live.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of what you experienced as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because my parents were entrepreneurs as well. They've owned a barbecue restaurant for over 30 years, and like restaurants are one of the toughest businesses you can be in. And it's funny because when I actually left my job to do real estate full time, my dad was like, you need to go back and get your job back. Right. And it's so crazy because he was an entrepreneur, but they worked in that business. They worked in the business instead of on the business for so long. And I think he just wanted the best for me. Right.
Yeah,
and
of course,
from what they see, engineering is a good job. Right. Which it is. But
yeah, I think there's a lot of corporations or industries out there that the majority, the masses would say, man, that's a great company. You should be lucky. You're lucky to be there. Or, man, that's a fantastic job title. You're like that. You don't want to do anything else. Like, just stick it out. But they're a little short-sighted. They just don't see the bigger picture of what can be. And when it comes to real estate investing, there's, at least from what I have seen, there's really just almost nothing that could beat it. I mean, really relatively low skill, and you can make, $500,000 a year. That's not much that can meet that.
Yeah, when I made my engineer salary in a month in real estate, it was an absolute game changer.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I've had, in fact, earlier this year we had one deal, it was a wholesale deal, ended up being, I think, an $85,000 or $87,000 profit, something like that. I had a total of about, I don't know, 2-3 hours into the deal. That equaled 2 years at the factory job. And those 2 years, I was working 60-hour weeks. So we're talking, let's just call it 6,000 hours at the factory versus one deal that took me a couple hours. Once you understand that, like, you can never ever work like as a salary or by the hour again. You just can't do it. It doesn't make sense. All right, so let's jump in. So you decided you want to get into real estate. What were your next steps? Like, how did you start forging your path?
Yeah, so I got on Bigger Pockets. I was listening to the podcast. I was reading all the books. I bought all of those books. I started trying to do it all myself. Like, I was going to look at MLS deals. I didn't have money. I didn't know what I was looking at. I was using those calculators without knowing anything. And I couldn't get a deal. It took me 2 or 3 months, and I just couldn't do it. I had a guy that I worked with at the factory, and he was like, hey, let's go to one of these real estate meetups. in our area. And so we did. We went to 2 or 3 of them, and I was hooked at that point. You know, the guy at the front of the room was a great salesman. You know, very charismatic, right? And I was like, when I met him, I was like, this is it. This is the guy. He's going to teach me how to do it. And so I hired him. You know, it was 18 grand. I didn't have it. I think when I filled out the application, I had 5 grand in the savings account. I think I only had 3. But I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen, but help me, and I'll do whatever you tell me to do, right? And so they actually set me up with a non-secured term loan from a bank that they used, which looking back now was probably a stupid thing to do, but I was going to make it happen regardless, right?
Yeah, when you're desperate, you pull it all stops. You just make it work.
I've interviewed and I've talked to like the last 3 or 4 people that I've talked to have said they put coaching on credit cards or whatever that they had to do to make it happen, right? So Absolutely. It is a thing.
I would say for the good majority of my education, I've borrowed in one way or another. You know, in the very beginning, I had a partner that brought me into the education program. But after that, everything I did, I'd say up until just a couple of years ago, was always purchased on credit cards, borrowed from family, and I had to pay back something, and sometimes high interest. But when you have that determination, that type of stuff just doesn't scare us at all. It's like, right. You know, we're so optimistic and positive about the outcome that we're like, oh, like, shoot, I'll make that work. 20,000, I'll figure that out. You know?
The last one that I did, I think me and you are part of the same one. But I paid like 25 grand. I put it on a credit card, and I didn't even tell my wife. I was so excited. I just done it. And I was like, oh yeah, by the way, we just paid for this. We're part of this coaching program now.
Yep. So. Okay. All right. Good stuff. All right. So so let's continue with that though. You invested the 18,000. What takes place with that coach or mentor? Did they end up, were they the one that really got you into it?
Yeah. Yep. They did. 3 to 4 months in, I had done 2 deals. I figured it out. I rolled with it. You know, I come in saying that I didn't want to be a wholesaler because I kind of thought I knew what a wholesaler was. And to me, I thought it was, you know, a very shady business. I didn't know what I didn't know. Right. And I said, I just want to buy rental properties. And so I started buying rental properties, 2 or 3 of them, and using other people's money. He gave me a hard money lender. I found the remaining that I had to bring to the table. I got a couple of deals done, and I realized that these rental properties are only bringing in $200 or $300 net a month. And when I first started, I was buying ghetto houses, you know, in the hood, and everything would break, and I had pest control, always had something was always going on. I wasn't making money, you know, and so I was like, I got to figure out something else. But when I started going to bigger events outside of my local area, I started meeting with people who were doing wholesaling, were doing marketing, were doing all the other stuff. And I was like, okay, so I don't have to technically be a wholesaler. I can be a well-rounded investor who knows multiple strategies, right? So I got my eyes opened at these events. So.
Yeah. So I want to dig in just a little bit deeper, you know, because you said within a few months you had done a couple of deals. So for the listener's sake, you know, a lot of them are probably relatively new, maybe have never done a deal. Let's break down that a little bit of the steps you took, or like whatever he coached you on, the steps you took that allowed you to do those couple deals within a very short amount of time. Like what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I didn't have money to do marketing, right? I didn't even know what true paid marketing was. And as I came into that coaching program, I didn't know any wholesalers. Like I didn't know I could buy deals from wholesalers and stuff like that. So the biggest transition for me was when I figured that part out, the wholesalers part. I got in every single group, and I still tell people to this day, like I buy from wholesalers today, 5 years later.
Yeah.
So like, if you don't want to utilize any of your own money, get into as many investing groups as you can on Facebook, and find these wholesalers. And I was, like I said, I was an engineer, so I knew basic Excel, right? And so I started an Excel sheet, and I had 60 to 70 wholesalers within a few months on that sheet. And I would just call them every single week. Hey, what do you have? Do you have anything? Like, I got money, send me your deals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I done my first 3 to 5 deals was
Awesome.
just through those guys.
Yeah, that's such good advice, Wyatt. One thing for listeners, one thing I always say is the exact same thing. Like, work with the wholesalers and stay top of mind, right? Like a lot of the wholesalers, one, you're going to have the smaller minority of wholesalers are going to be doing a lot of volume. They're going to be doing a lot of volume, a lot of marketing, but a large majority of the wholesalers are only going to be doing deals once in a while, right? You're talking maybe 1 to 2 a month, if they're lucky, probably more sporadic than that. And so for them, they're not professional wholesalers, and they're wanting the certainty that they have a buyer ready to go. They're not going to be out there fishing and like trying to get the highest paying buyer. They don't have a buyer's list of 1,000 people. They don't have any of that stuff. They want a couple people to go to that they can sell their deal to. And so when you stay top of mind to those wholesalers, you're going to get the deal, right?
Yep, 100%. And it's just like any other marketing too. Like, don't get it twisted. It took time, right? So for every 100 leads that you get from wholesalers, there may be 1 or 2 good ones out of it. So it's just like cold calling or direct mail or anything else. You got to go through 100 leads to get a good deal, right?
Yeah, but it's really, what you're talking about is really good though, because it proves that there's countless free sources of deal flow out there. Okay. Like so much of the show is we talk about marketing and stuff, which is huge, but there's also tons of free sources of deal flow, and like they have to be worked, especially in the beginning when you don't have a big marketing budget. They have to be utilized, and usually you have to be working multiple lead sources of generation that are free, and between all of those that you're working, stuff starts to pop.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go in just a little bit deeper. All right. So you got those first couple deals under your belt. Kind of tell us about those next couple years of what takes place.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could tell you that I made just a ridiculous amount of money and turned it into marketing and then scaled up and done all this. But I think 3 or 4 deals in, I decided that I wanted to start doing flipping too. And I made 20 grand on my first flip, which was an 800 square foot, 2-bed, 1-bath, like an hour and a half away from me. And I completely gutted it for my very first flip. And I actually made money on that, but there were so many things that I learned, and I actually had to get a contractor out of jail on that one, which was crazy, right? But we made money on it. And so at that point, I decided I could take on the world, right? And so I got into another flip that I thought that I could gut and do the same thing. It was closer, the numbers were better, and I ended up losing $60,000 on it. And I just remember like sitting outside of that in my truck, like crying, like dodging people's phone calls and things like that. And I was like, man, I don't know, I'm done.
That's a big loss. That's a big loss for that early in your career.
Yeah, it was huge. And it took me a while to kind of crawl out of that. But, one thing that I did, I was thinking about this while, on the way here, was that so often when we get into a bad situation, we put our heads under the covers and we try, to duck everybody and eventually we got to figure it out. But one thing that I never done was never even thought about not buying another deal. Like I was in the process of looking for deals during that whole thing. Right. And so I know people now that are struggling that have just stopped. They went through a hard time and they've stopped and they're like being too picky on deals now and things like that. And I'm like, hey, if you don't pull the trigger, you're never going to find the perfect deal.
But if you can just do such a good nugget, so good. Because it's so true that, it is 100% guaranteed that you'll come across deals in this business, in this industry, where you will lose money on eventually. It's probably not going to happen that much, but it will happen. I've had them happen. I think my biggest loss was like 40,000. I think I've only lost on maybe 3 to 4 in my career out of maybe 1,000. So it's very, very small percentage. But they hurt, they sting, and especially that big and that early, that really hurts. But the fastest way to work your way out of it is to go do more deals. It's not to quit and go back to the work. It's not to go get another job. It's certainly not to like wonder how wonder what's going to happen and feel like I've talked to people where they're practically suicidal when this kind of stuff happens. And it's like, man, just go knock out a few deals, a few wholesales, and it's done. It's over. Right.
Yep. That's it. You got to continue on. And another thing that I learned out of that was that everybody involved is trying to help you. Like nobody's trying to come after you and break your kneecaps or anything like that. Like the bank, the hard money lender, the bridge lender, even contractors, some of those guys were my friends at the time. And I ducked them for a couple of weeks because I didn't know what I was going to do. But every single one of those people were just trying to help me. And they were trying to, figure out what we can do to make things happen. And so for me moving forward, that was huge because whenever I'd run into an issue, I'd immediately call somebody and be like, hey, you're the hard money lender. Hey, I know you're an investor. This is what I'm going through. What do you think? Bridge lender is an investor. What do you think? That everybody, most of the people you're going to work with have been there, done that, and they've been doing it longer than you have. So they can help you out, right?
Yeah, it's good advice. Yeah, I encountered the exact same thing, did the exact same thing. I've had I'd say a couple spurts in my career where it always came from rehabbing. That's what always put me into the situation. Both times was I just got too deep in the rehabbing. I was robbing Peter to pay Paul. I was like, I was using money from some job sites to try to pay for others. And, there's one point where I was like 150,000 negative and I'm like, how can I possibly get my way out of this? And same thing. I was kind of like just putting my head in the sand. And then finally I'm like, all right, this does not show me as being, having integrity and character. Like this is not who I want to be. So I'm like, I just called everybody that I owed, contractors, lenders, said, listen, I'm gonna figure this out. It's going to take me a little bit. You're probably not going to get paid next week or next month, but I will pay you. And then I said, okay, how do I fix this problem? And I said, I can't fix it by borrowing more. I just gotta go into sell mode, right? Like sell everything. I start liquidating. And so any projects we were working on, they were sales, no more rehabs, like just wholesale as fast as I could. Next thing I know, problem was, obliterated. I mean, and it's happened quite a couple times now to where now I've realized that anytime that type of problem comes up, that there's a solution, that we can just work through it. We can sell our way through it, that we don't have to allow it to stress us out so much.
Yeah. I mean, as you continue to do more and more, you just become a better problem solver. The problems are never going to be gone. Like as soon as you get over one problem, there's going to be another one come up, right? And so what you just become better at like being better at handling stress, anxiety, like the things that used to keep me up at night.
Yeah.
Like I'm not losing sleep anymore, man. Like, that stuff ain't bothering me anymore.
I remember Russell Brunson calling it, he talked about it as cycling, that, you have to go through these cycles. And, he was talking about how some of his mentors and, people of really high level financially in business, but they wouldn't do business with people that haven't cycled in their life and financially. And so having going through these different cycles, it allows us that resiliency to work through it. And without going through these things, we don't figure out how to get through them. But as we go through them, we figure out that they're not really all that big a deal. It just takes a little bit of problem solving. We learn a lesson, we get better for the next time, and it makes us better business people and better investors.
Yeah, 100%.
And we for the listeners, we can't try to avoid all the problems, because the problems are truly what makes us better. We don't get better from everything going right. We get better from things going wrong and learning how to get better at it.
Right. 100%.
All right. So Wyatt, I know that you specialize in seller financing. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to get into seller financing and kind of how that works for you.
Yeah, it literally was exactly what you said. When I got into flipping, I just got around people doing a lot of deals, and that seemed to be the lead that we could get and close on the most was the flips. And you know, maybe for a lack of good salesmanship or whatever back then, but we scaled up to do 4 or 5 flips at a time. You know, we hired a couple of acquisitions guys, and like I was telling you before the interview started, it just started to become the worst time of my life. Like, I had gained weight. You know, my family wasn't doing good back home. My spirituality was out the window. Like, everything, it was the worst time of my life, pretty much. We were robbing Peter to pay Paul. You know, we were making a lot of money, just a crap ton of money, but it was all going somewhere else, out into the deep, dark hole of flips, right? So we had to stop, and we hit a wall, and we were like, we can't keep doing this. And me and my partner at the time, and we had somebody that he was a realtor. He was just funneling her all kind of deals, and she was seller financing, and she had tried to get us for maybe a year to get into seller financing. We were like, we don't have a clue how you're making money. We don't know. We didn't have, at that time, we didn't have the time to stop and figure it out, right? But we finally had to make time to figure something else out, and you know, that's when we said we got to get our cash flow up. But the rental game, you know, from the past, that's not the way to do it either. And so we were like, let's try this seller financing thing out. So we sat down with her, we had lunch, we talked through it all, and we're like, let's just try this. And so the big thing about the seller financing is that, you know, you're still buying the property. If we're talking about the back end, you're still buying the property using the BRRRR method: buy, renovate, refinance, repeat. But instead of putting a renter in there, you're putting a tenant buyer in there. And so they're putting a big down payment down. They've got a big gap between what I'm all in for and what they're all in for. We've got a gap between our interest rate. They're paying an interest rate, right? And we can get into all of this. But the biggest thing is they pay the insurance and the taxes, and they maintain the property because they're buying it, essentially, right? And so you get more, but you get all the good things of being a landlord without all the bad things of being a landlord, right?
So I have a little bit of experience seller financing. I've done a couple. So I've got some questions of my own, just for my own education. So I'm going to fire those off.
Yeah.
So what, you know, the gap between what you're all in for and what they're paying, do you have a normal spread that you shoot for?
Yeah. Our average right now is around 50 to 60,000. I'll go as low as 30,000. My partner, he won't go lower than 50. But I like to turn deals. I like to do more volume. He wants the big deals,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. What's the gap between the interest rates?
So 4%. So we're selling them for anywhere from 10 to 12%.
Wow. Okay. What's the average price of the houses that you're selling?
Yeah. So 160 to 180. So we're buying them for around 100 and, anywhere from 100 to 130.
Are you doing the repairs and getting them fully rehabbed, or not doing any repairs at all?
No, we've really failed it. How do I want to say this? We've really upped our sales game, and we're really good now at getting good properties deeply discounted. So what we do is now, instead of trying to find the ARV and go 80% of that, because we're talking about the BRRRR method, we're looking at the as is value. Do we think it'll appraise as is so that we can get all that hard money lender back his money? And those are the kind of deals we're looking at now. I mean, we've gotten some for 20, 30,000, and this is on the low end of the spectrum. Our normal houses are turnkey. Most of the time they're a little outdated, but they're turnkey, they're livable. But we've gotten some that were like $20,000-$30,000 houses and sold them for an upwards of $90,000 to $100,000 as is, and it really just comes our way, whatever comes our way. But we don't want to do rehab to our houses. We'll do whatever we need to do to get it to appraise, but our sales are so good that we're getting it to where we don't have to.
So one of the things I struggled with was getting the banks to want to finance these types of deals, right? Like they love to finance the rentals, especially like we do nice like high end suburban rentals, so banks love them. But how do you get the banks to get on board with financing these types of properties?
So there are some banks that we've just talked to, and they're good with it. They don't care. There are some banks that don't, similar to what you're saying. And at first, we just didn't use those banks. But what we realized was they've just got to check boxes, and they don't, so essentially our land sales contracts are not recorded, right? They can be recorded if something was to go wrong, but they're not recorded. And so what we do is we get them to sign a lease agreement at closing for the banks. So we get them to sign that, we give it to the banks, and that's what they do. Now we work with people who want to do the deals and don't care, but we have given them lease agreements too, because essentially that's what it is. They're renting that property until it's paid for, right? Nothing's recorded, so that's just kind of the way we've done things. And
do the banks even know that you're selling them seller financing?
Some do and some don't.
Okay.
Most of my bankers follow me on Facebook, so
Okay.
they have to know, because that's all I talk about on Facebook is seller finance deals. We do deal breakdowns, and we talk about each individual house, and so they know. But like I said, the banks want to work with you. They just got to check boxes. So you got to figure out the ways to check those boxes for them.
Yeah, that's one thing I would say I've encountered is that if you don't have that conversation with them up front, they may not really care all that much. But when you try to have that conversation up front that you're going to be selling seller financing, then a lot of times they're saying, oh, like we don't really want to do those.
I've figured this out over the years, but I'm the king of not giving any more information than what's absolutely needed, right?
Okay.
No matter what you're doing, like mine and my partner's first deals together was a big portfolio, and we got out there, we spent weeks walking these properties, and right towards the end where we were getting ready to close, my partner was telling him what we plan to do with the properties, using the BRRRR method and refinancing out and pulling all that money back out. And he was like, you mean I can pull my money out of these properties and keep them at the same time?
Yeah.
And then he took them out that day. He dropped them that day. So
yeah, bankers don't like that conversation either. If you're telling them you're going to be pulling all your money out, and they're like, nah, like we like your money in the deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So what type of down payment are you normally getting, or is it a percentage?
Yeah, normally it's 10%. On the cheaper, crummier houses will go, like 5-10 grand. But we want to create, and I'm sure you've probably seen this doing seller financing a little bit. We come across people all the time who have been burned on seller financing because they put terms on these tenant buyers that there's absolutely no way that they can make it happen, right? And so people are just turning down payments. For us, that's too much work. Like, we want to do less work. Like, we want to create good terms where these people are going to 20, 30 years down the road actually have a house, right? So we set 30-year amortizations. We do 10% down. The interest is high, but the bank's making interest off us. We got to make interest off of you, right? So
yeah, and I think the way I look at that too is I don't want to get if I'm going to do one, I don't want to get paid off in 5 years. I want them to be paying me forever.
Yeah.
I want them to be paying me their whole life.
Yeah, I think people. One argument that I always have to talk through is, well, this isn't long-term wealth, right? You don't own the property; it's not long-term wealth, right? And I think generational wealth is kind of a scam, anyways. We can talk about that, but I always give them an example of 10 houses, 10 rental properties that are, let's just say they're cash flowing $200 a month, right? That's $2,400. I don't do public math, so right, that's $2,400 a month for a year. It's $24,000, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Close enough.
Not 24,000 a year. 2,400 times 12, 28,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
And that's all you're going to get. And you may get some tax breaks, but if an HVAC system goes dead or a water heater goes dead, you're not making $28,000. And if you're paying a property manager, you're not making $28,000, right? So turn around and look at 10 seller finance deals where our average net cash flow is $600 a month, right? So just off the cash flow times 10, that's $6,000 a month times 12, that's $72,000 a year. So right there, we're already well over double in just the cash flow alone, right? But then you take 10 houses at, let's just say our average down payment's 15 grand. That's $150,000 in a year from down payments alone, right?
Well, that's one of the things I'm seeing, as I'm kind of like playing some numbers in my head, is that, from a wholesale, like ours are probably average, we're a little bit over 20,000, maybe even 25,000 right now, because we've had some really big ones this year. But, there's a lot that'll end up being 15,000 or so. So those down payments on some of those seller financing can be almost as much as you get as a wholesale, but then you're getting, the monthly cash flow, plus you're getting, a back end payout.
Yeah. I mean, that's if you do 200, 300 of those, I mean, that's generational wealth to me. I mean, I don't know about you, but if you're stewarding that money properly, that's generational wealth.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think, so here's my next question though, is, and this is something I can't ever seem to get a really clear answer from people. How do you get around the Frank Dodd laws of, that I think you're only supposed to do like 3 per year or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we met with our attorneys, we met with multiple attorneys in town to make sure that, because we had done 10 to 15 before we even heard of the Dodd-Frank Act, right? And so we got with those guys, we let them see our contracts, we let them see the way that we were doing them, the land sales contracts, the purchase agreements. They are, the tenant buyer is essentially originating that loan the way that we do it. And I'll do a terrible job of explaining this. So if you need to talk to my attorney, I'll more than happily give you my attorney's number to talk through it. But the way we structured it is that in our contract, they are originating that loan for themselves, right? So that's how we've managed to get around it. And that's
so like the way I've interpreted it, both through talking to attorneys and people that do these at high volume, and is that the laws are just very gray in that department.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think that's what scares me a little bit, is because I like it to be black and white. Like, I want to know that I'm not ever going to get in trouble. And, so one of my attorneys, not my main attorney, but call him my secondary attorney, he does these, right? So he does them. So he would be my go-to person of saying, hey, like, how do I make this work? And he kind of said the same thing of, the laws are just not black and white enough to where we know exactly what can be done. He's, he kind of does it his way. But he's like, if you were to ever get called out, by the feds, he's like, I don't know how much you'd have to stand on if you're doing high volume.
Well, one of the things, and we looked at it from a different angle as well, is like, who's gonna be the one to call you out on it, right? And 9 times out of 10, it's the tenant buyer that's gonna be your issue. So I could see that if you were one of those guys that were making the terms where they can't, and then turn around and taking the house out from under them and turning down payments and stuff like that. But we have a great relationship with all of our guys. Like, and we try to make it such a good process. Like, they've got their kids at the closing table. We're talking through stuff. It's just been a great community and a great way to do deals with people that will never own property without doing it this way.
And I wholeheartedly agree. The few that I've done, I've only had one that went bad, of course, and that was because I allowed somebody else to essentially find my buyer, and they brought in some deadbeats. But the other few that I've done, they were extremely grateful. They paid on time every single month, never missed a payment, never was even a single day late. Very, very good tenant buyers. And yeah, same thing. Like they were just super grateful that they got into a house that they didn't think they'd ever get into. It all went well. So I don't have anything bad to say whatsoever. And I think that if you are treating people well, if you're doing it not only for your benefit, but also for theirs, you're wanting to take good care of them. You're wanting to position terms to where it can be affordable, to where they're not going to get hurt. If something ever comes up, you try to work with them as opposed to just trying to get the house back and try to resell it. Like I've heard of investors doing that. It's just, so I think that there's the right way to do it. And if you do it the right way, it's probably extremely unlikely that things are going to go bad.
Right.
But that possibility does probably exist.
That's one reason why, like, especially with beginners coming in and wanting to do seller financing, I tell them, we don't even have a template for our land sales contract. Our attorney does it custom for every single deal that we do. And so that kind of takes some of it off of me too, because I know if my attorney is going to do this up every single time, then he's going to go to bat for it every single time. Yeah. So that makes me feel better as well. So I don't do land sales contracts myself, and I don't close them myself, which nothing has to be, signed and sealed. So you can, but I don't.
Yeah, nothing else. You can kind of like back off and say, hey, my attorney was the one that did it. I didn't say anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Wyatt, being that this show is all about lead generation, I mean, I could talk about this kind of stuff forever because I love deal structure and alternative ways of investing. But this is all about lead generation. So I want to dig in a little bit to what you have going on in your business that allows you to find these deals. So first of all, on average year, how many deals would you say you guys are doing?
I'd say now, man, I've stopped keeping track, but now we're doing probably 30 to 40 a year. I mean, it's nothing crazy. We used to want to do over 100 a year, like I said. And like, if you would ask me that a year and a half ago, I'd been like to the moon, but
we had that conversation before the call started and you get into a very high volume and everything has to change in the business. So you can,
and it changes once your portfolio is right. Like once you get to where you're bringing in enough money to live happily.
Yeah.
Your mindset, I feel like your mindset kind of changes. It's like, okay, well, I don't have to, do these deals. I don't have to chase them as hard as I used to chase them. I can be a little bit more picky on my deals. Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, if you just figured it, 30 deals on low end times a $10,000 down payment, that's $300,000 to your bottom line, just in down payment money, not even counting cash flow. So, for anybody listening and saying, oh, that's not really that many, it's not all about the amount of deals somebody does. The profitability is what counts. So sometimes there's people that do a smaller amount of volume that have a very, very profitable business model. And there's other people that do an insane amount of volume that are not profitable at all or very, very little. So I've seen it both.
Yeah, when we were doing 6 figures a month, like the first few months, our sales guys were getting paid more than we were.
Yeah.
Like we were not taking salaries, it was, and that's something like, that's a whole nother conversation. Like, I don't think a lot of people are going to have, or are having to go through that we've went through. Like you're a coach, I'm a coach, right? Some of the guys that we coach, like are not going to have to go through this, because they're learning from us what to do, what not to do. But like there was so much struggle in the beginning where people were getting paid and I was like, how long can I keep this up?
Yeah. Okay. So into the lead generation. So what do you have going on in your business that allows you to find these deals?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started doing paid marketing, I started doing texting and I started doing it all myself. We were using REI Reply or something like that. We were texting people back. We were doing everything. And it was bringing in a lot. Texting was bringing in a lot way back when. It still does. But just so many rules and regulations have come down the line and we kind of got away from it. I went to several events and this guy, I think you may know him, from REI Print Mail, Ryan Dixon. He managed to sit next to me at every event that I ever went to. And he was always like, hey, you should do postcards. You should do postcards. And I was always under that limiting belief that everybody and their mom does postcards. So why do I want to do postcards? But when I first started doing postcards, that was one week where we spent $3,000 and made 70 over the course of the next 2 months.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, we're doing postcards.
Yeah, it works.
But since then, you get to the point to where you don't want to take calls anymore. You don't want to text people anymore. And you start to put things in place. For me, I started to change up and do done for you systems. So like REI Print Mail has a done for you system. And then Lead Mining Pros is they do texting and cold calling for you. And essentially you just get leads in that want to sell their house. You still have to filter through them, but they're not all the FUs and screw offs and stuff like that, right? So you're getting a lot of your time back doing that.
Okay. So you're not doing any texting anymore, is that right?
Yeah. So I do it through Lead Mining Pros. Yeah.
Lead Mining Pros.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nicholas with Lead Mining Pros. Dude's great. He's blowing up. He's on.
Oh, Nick. Okay. Yeah, I know.
Podcasts.
Okay. I know who you're talking about. Yep. Okay. I'll have to have him on the show. Okay. And then you're doing direct. How much are you just sending in direct mail as far as pieces?
Yeah. Anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 a month. It's not much.
So I want the listeners to really pay attention to that, because I know we've had a lot of people on the show, that talk about doing 10,000 up to 100,000 plus pieces a month. There's an extremely small percentage of people that are going to be able to start there, or may ever even end up there. 1,000, 2,000 pieces, just about anybody can do. You're talking $500 to $1,000 a month for a marketing budget. Almost everybody that's come into my coaching program, they have that ability to spend on marketing. So that's, like I always say, if you have three sources, one, paid marketing, some type of paid marketing source, some type of a prospecting source, and then building your network, like you were talking about the wholesalers, right? So you use 3 different lead generation avenues and you've got it made. Like that's a 30 to 40 deals per year business.
Yep, absolutely.
When I've done a smaller amount of direct mail, I really didn't get that much bang for my buck.
That's what I was gonna expound upon too, is like, you really, over the years, you really dial in your avatar, who you're trying to hit, and the market that you're trying to hit.
Yeah.
And for me, like coming from an engineering background, and people don't do this. Most people don't do this, but I track KPIs. I'm a nerd for numbers and graphs and everything like that. So like, I know with Lead Mining Pros in one specific market that I absolutely love, I can spend $550 to $600 and get a deal out of it, which is stupid cheap. But I can do that. Right. And there are other markets that you can't, like some of the direct mail takes $1,200 to $1,500 to get a deal.
Yeah.
Like I know how much it costs me to get a deal, and I spend that per month with what I want to get per year.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep. That's awesome. So what you're talking about is because you now know, right? You've spent the money, you've dialed it in, you've tracked your KPIs. You now know with certainty what you can expect from spending money. Yep. And as an investor, that's everything to us, because we can say, well, we can project, we can say, well, I want to do 30 deals per year, 50 deals per year, whatever it is. These are the things I have to have in place. This is how much I have to spend. And then, because we're getting that, usually getting paid back pretty much monthly for the most part, all we got to do is really have to do is kind of do it once, a couple times, and that starts to replenish itself.
Yep. And then turn the knob from there.
Yep, exactly. Dial it up. Well, Wyatt, this has been an awesome interview. I'd love to learn more about seller financing. I definitely see that as being a part of my portfolio here in the very near future. So might either have to have you on again or figure out a way to talk and learn some more about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can people dig into you more and learn more about you?
Yeah, you can just find me on Facebook, Wyatt Reed. I'm probably the only redhead on there, maybe. You can just search up Seller Finance Deals. I have a Facebook group, or sellerfinancedeals.com, and you can check it out there.
Awesome. Well, Wyatt, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. And guys, if you would listen to this episode and give us a 5-star review, and feel free to connect with me on Instagram. Let me know what you thought about the show, and we'll talk to you soon.
This episode is over, but we're not done here. For tons more actionable advice, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Ready to get help from Mark directly? Visit marklaneeducation.com to schedule a consultation and kickstart your lead generation strategies right away. We'll see you next time on More Leads, More Deals, More Profits with Mark Lane.